Welcome everyone. I'm here today with Chris to have a catch-up talk since he was last with us during the PNVC last year. Chris, how are you doing?
Really well, thanks. How are you?
Yeah, doing fantastic. Thank you. Could you please introduce yourself and also Unibail-Rodamco-Westfield?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm Chris Mitchell. I'm the car park and estate manager for Westfield Stratford City in the United Kingdom, part of the Unibail-Rodamco-Westfield portfolio. Working specifically at Stratford, but have an insight into our sister centre over at White City as well.
So you were with us last year, almost a year ago, and you were talking about the impact the COVID has had and the changes you've had to make. Could you maybe highlight the major changes since then?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, obviously, since we last met, the situation with COVID in the UK remained stable through the autumn, and then obviously we had a very sharp lockdown just 3 days before Christmas, which was extremely challenging for both our centres and our parking operations. And that really remained the state of play through to March and April, when initially the shopping centres were able to reopen, less the food and beverage offer, and obviously even within that there were still caveats and guidelines that we had to operate to around capacity numbers. But in terms of the parking side of things, again, we continue to work with our tenants and obviously with our guests to look at the tariff to make sure that we were making sure that parking was a viable option ahead of putting people onto public transport where the risk of transmission of COVID was much higher. And that's really been our focus throughout the last 8-9 months. The great news for the UK is that from the 19th of July, all of the COVID guidelines and rules and regulations were relaxed. Food and beverage outlets were able to open for internal service and also service at bars and not just seated. And since that time, we've been very fortunate that we've been able to return to normal parking operations. And glad to say that our volumes are recovering very strongly as well.
And you had mentioned that, especially last year, there was more and more focus towards frictionless parking and touchless. Could you expand on how things have maybe developed in that area?
Yeah, so our centre at White City is now fully ticketless. So we don't even have any tickets. So that's arrive at the car park, and obviously the ANPR cameras read the number plates, and the guests will then make a payment on their way out of the car park, either at the pay machines or at the exits themselves. And that's a service that we're working on bringing to Stratford before the end of this year as well. And in terms of our frictionless service, smart parking, for guests who are regular visitors to the centre, that's what we've been pushing. Obviously, it allows for automated payments, no need for the guest to interact with the payment machine or the exit machine at any stage. And with all of the different risks around COVID, that can only be a good news story. So we've continued to push that. As our commuter market slowly starts to return this month, the use of smart parking is increasing, as it tends to be people who visit the centre 2 or 3 times a week who would favour that service. And we've worked really hard with our partners to push that service and get the mix of smart parkers up as high as possible.
All right, and what kind of a response has there been from the customers that have been using these services?
They absolutely love it. I mean, it's a wonderful reaction you see from a guest the first time they use it, particularly guests who may not be familiar with using car parks on a regular basis. Just to see the barriers raised automatically, the fact they don't have to leave their vehicle, they don't need to queue at any of the payment machines. In terms of the actual service, it goes down hugely well with our customers, both new and old.
Perfect. And could you maybe talk a little bit about the visitors that have been coming to the shopping centers? I know that last year, because of the impact of COVID, it was mainly the local visitors. Have you seen more domestic visits from the UK or even international visitors coming in?
I think it's difficult for the international market at the moment because of the guidelines and the regulations around testing when you enter the UK and the different rules and regulations from different parts of the world. But the good news in the UK is that those rules seem to be relaxing. There's some news in the press as recently as this morning that gives us some real hope. But it's fair to say in terms of the domestic market, that does appear to be recovering strongly. Car park length of stay is increasing. The distances people are travelling to get to the centre seem to be increasing as well, which would indicate that the reach of the shopping centre is getting further and further. And since the school holidays ended in the UK at the end of August, we've noticed quite a big shift towards the commuter market returning and the local offices repopulating around both of our centres, and that's translated very nicely into increased volumes for us.
And good to hear. And so with working from home, now and more with the situation improving, there's a bit of a more of a combination that companies have been using instead of simply having everybody at the office and everybody working from home. What are you seeing when it comes to the market and at the shopping centers?
Really, as recently as last week, it's becoming more and more of a hybrid. I personally don't think we'll ever get back to the stages of having 100% of people back in the office every day. But we're seeing about up to 2/3 of the offices being populated on any given day. I think a lot of the local organisations have adopted flexible working, which will see their teams working from home 1 or 2 days a week, and then coming to the office the rest of the time. We have seen a slight modal shift with car use increase slightly, and I think that will continue certainly through the winter months and into 2022. And again, that all lends itself very nicely to increase car park volumes for us.
Perfect. So in terms of looking ahead to the future, what are your expectations? Where do you see things going?
I think it's still a little bit up in the air. We're very confident and we're very hopeful that given the range of services that we have, that there is huge opportunities for both footfall to the centres and for the volumes of cars into the car parks to return to pre-pandemic numbers at some point in 2022. A lot of the early indicators are that confidence from consumers is increasing. There's less nervousness around the impacts of the pandemic, and whilst the pandemic is still very much part of our day-to-day lives, people are very excited and very keen to get back to normal.
All right, Chris, is there anything else that you wanted to add?
I just think it's been a hugely difficult time for the whole industry. It's been really interesting to see how all of our colleagues and partners across different organisations, different industries have reacted and responded to the pandemic. And let's just have fingers crossed that we are slowly coming out the other side and that 2022 is a new dawn.
Me as well, Chris. Wish you all the best, and I hope the recovery continues.
Thank you very much.
Thank you everyone for joining. Make sure to like and subscribe, and we'll see you again next time.